This is Common Sense, Ohio. Brett's here. Norm's here. Steve is, well, when you hear me intro the show, you know Steve's not here. So Steve is defending the universe in another universe.
Well said.
So, yeah, put it that way. Welcome to another edition. Probably our last Friday edition. We're looking at flipping to another day, probably Wednesday. But we'll put an official announcement on social media, but be looking for our live feed on Wednesdays. We just going to fit our schedule a little bit better and also the news cycle a little bit better. So we're going to do some experimentation. So what do we got on headlines coming up for the show?
Well, I thought that we would discuss economic news. Obviously, the stock market on Wednesday had the fourth highest gain since 1940. It went up almost 10%, which is just ridiculous. And then, of course, yesterday it lost about half of that. So the net gain, if you will, is around 5% with all this fluctuating. But still, there was a steady decline after the tariffs were announced. So we're nowhere near back to pre-tariff announcement levels on the stock market. Yeah. But that's different than the economy. The stock market, oddly enough, people probably don't know this, but only about 10% of Americans are invested in the stock market directly. Now, obviously their employers and retirement plans and whatever are also, they're invested. But out of U.S. citizens, only about 10% own any kind of stocks or mutual funds. 80% of that 10%, they own 80% of the stock market. So 10% of Americans own 80% of the stock.
Feel the pains of the up and down. Right.
So, exactly. And I would say that 10% are probably, that's the most wealthy Americans probably, right? There aren't a lot of poor folks that have a broker that buys stock for them. I'm sure there's a few. I was one when I went through law school. I played around with Chrysler stock and made a little bit of money to help pay my tuition. But I had this feeling that the U.S. government was going to bail out one of the big three companies with Lee Iacocca, you remember?
Oh, yeah.
He borrowed money and then he paid it back early. So I bought it at like $1 a share, and I think I sold it at 15. So that paid tuition.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good deal.
But very few Americans, 90% are not in the stock market directly. And of those 90%, they only own 20% of the stock. So it's not the economy is my point. The economy is different. And, there have been times when the economy was booming and the stock market was under 10,000. We're now at like 40,000. And at one point we were poking around at 50,000, like last fall after the election. So the economy is a separate thing. And I think what we're seeing on the stock market, my take, Brett, is that the multinationals that are in the stock market, and I'm talking like Ford, Apple, Walmart, Amazon, companies that are really worldwide companies. They source so much stuff from China that the stock market is reflecting this. I think now it's 145% tariff that Trump has on China, and China just announced they're going to 125 on stuff they import from the U.S., which is not much, frankly. They don't import that much.
Right, exactly.
So the multinationals, if you own stock in, say, Amazon, right, and Amazon has a ton of Chinese sellers on Amazon, and now they're going to get tariffed, and they don't have the de minimis postage rates that they used to have. Obviously that's bad for Amazon. So people are looking at these tech stocks that depend heavily on China, and they're going down. And the amounts of their share price has gone down rather steeply.
Yeah, I think with the Chinese 125. You got to really take a look at what the Chinese do import from us, and farmers are going to get hit the hardest on that.
Maybe
with the soy products.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah.
But the farmers have been taking it on the chin for a long time.
Yeah.
Honestly, with this, so it's
Right.
that again, everybody's got their touch point on who's going to get hurt and who's not, and we'll see.
Well, I think this is a structural thing that Trump is trying to pull off. So what Brett just said is true, obviously, that the cost for the Chinese to import whatever they do, like soybeans to make plastics out of, and other kinds of items from agriculture, for example, probably beef, I don't know, whatever else they import. Yeah. I think this. So what is being explained at the White House, their motivation, we talked about this last week a bit, is that U.S. like Chinese companies may relocate factories or facilities to America, which they already have tons here, right? And the Japanese, like, Honda plant being built in Indiana, the Honda plants here in Marysville, Ohio. The idea is to get some of these foreign manufacturers of pharmaceuticals and whatever else, chips, to get those factories into the United States, and then they're not subject to the tariff. I mean, that's the point.
Yeah, that is the point. Exactly. Yeah. Or at least,
but that takes a while. That's not going to happen in 2 or 3 days. That takes a while.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, and I think, and we kind of touched upon this last week too, that it's that what is the end game? What are the signed contracts saying? How do we follow up on?
Right.
Okay, you say you're going to. When does ground start breaking, or you already have it here and you just unmothball a plant or something? I don't know. You take a look at what had maybe just left. Maybe a year or two ago, can you bring it back that quickly and start going? And I would like to see a focus on. I would like, we felt the COVID feel of that, the necessities that we need to bring back here.
Yeah, because if another country is taking care of their own population, I mean, China has 1 billion people, India has 1 billion people, and like if some kind of pandemic breaks out again, they're going to revert back to what they did and say, well, we're going to save whatever the Vaxes or ivermectin or Bear aspirin or whatever it is. Yeah. Or PPP, the gloves and the masks. We're going to save that for our own population first. And you can't blame them. I mean,
we would do the same, right?
Exactly.
I mean, ultimately,
you would hope so. We would do, but we don't have domestic manufacturers, if you can believe this, of aspirin. So you would think like Bayer Pharmaceuticals in Germany would note that their tariff is now whatever it is, 10% or whatever it is on pharmaceuticals from the EU, and look at, like you say, a shuttered U.S. pharmaceutical plant here, and they buy it and they say, well, let's get around the 10%. We'll just make it in America.
Yeah. And it's just, to me, like I said, we talked about this, is the follow-up and the watchful eye that, okay, you said you're going to do this, now let's do this, and
it's in
whatever happens.
I mean, that's an organic way for it to happen. So when it's in their own best interest, nobody really needs to track that, because it's not like the U.S. is investing money in them. No,
but it's that. But we see this though. My point being, we see this. Okay, we say we're going to do it. Now we've skirted the tariffs, but we really don't follow up on what we said we're going to do.
Well, yeah,
but I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's coming in through customs,
right, and that would be the track right there.
That would be the track. It's going to get tariffed.
Yeah, right there it is. Yeah, exactly.
But like but Brett's point about companies not following through on promises. I mean, we have that going on here in Ohio with Intel, and now Microsoft has announced that they are not building the 3 data centers that they had planned to build in Ohio.
Which really not necessarily a bad thing, because it wasn't going to bring a ton of jobs.
Well, what it
to
did
build it was, but to man it, unless I missed the numbers.
But what's bad, Brett, is they bought 700 prime acres.
Right. It's already kind of a done. We're giving birth to it already. Right. Yeah, the kid's there. Yeah,
and the people out there, the little old lady, spinsters that want to stay in their home and not go to a nursing home. Their real estate taxes have gone bonkers because of the real estate being revalued by the auditor. Right. So there's not much tax relief in this in the Ohio's new state budget. They played around with school districts. That's the other big thing going on here. They just passed the Ohio budget, and it's on its way to the governor, who has veto power on line items here in Ohio, unlike the president in the federal budget. Right. Exactly. So we'll see what DeWine does. But they threw this bauble and then did some ridiculous calculation that doesn't pass muster, that if a school district carries over 30% of its money from the previous budget year, then the taxpayers, the property taxpayers in that district get some kind of a break on their property taxes. But I think it's not addressing the bigger problem.
Exactly. And this is we were going to talk a little bit later, and we'll bring this back up again. But since we're on the subject, just to unfold this. So I'm kind of wondering if Ohio legislators don't understand the process of bonding as well. These school districts have to have some money in reserve to get an A rating or a high rating for bonding, and that's basically 30 to 50% in the bank.
Right.
And also, those school districts that are doing the best savings that they can, they actually extend their current levies by multiple years.
Yeah,
many school districts, you think about this.
They don't have to keep going back.
They don't have to keep going back.
Because they have a surplus.
Correct. We live in Hilliard school districts, and they've been pretty good patrons of dollars. I mean, they've extended levies 3 to 4 years because they've done a good job. And, they've taken care of property, that sort of thing. They've been good stewards of the dollars, but they've extended levies by, a handful of years because of looking at those savings. And this back and forth of, it's a Band-Aid. Do you think it's going to help property taxes? Like, I get $1,000 this year. And guess what? The next year you're going to have to pay back in higher because they don't have enough money to get a decent bond or whatever the case might be. It's just a quick fix. They think it's hooray, hurrah.
Yeah.
I just don't think they've got their heads thinking about what they're actually asking of this whole Senate or House bill.
They're saying that 30% carryover, that somewhere around 2/3 of school districts do this. But that doesn't address property tax relief.
No.
And what I'm talking about when I say property tax relief is I mean for if you will, the pioneers, the people, the homesteaders, the people that are already in the district, been there for years. Let's say you have to have been in the district for 10 years, something like that. That when a major shift happens in property tax values of your house, the people who have been there the longest, it should affect the least. And why do I say that? It's because those people are heading, to the grave. They're in retirement.
They've paid decades of property taxes already.
Right. And for the right to keep their house, because like if you don't pay your taxes, right, they're going to take it from, they can take the house away from you. Ultimately, you don't pay enough years or half years of your property taxes. They're going to take you to court. They're going to get your house, that meaning your county, the county you live in, and take it from you potentially. And there are people on fixed incomes. If their little 5-acre farm in, say, New Albany or Johnstown suddenly goes from being worth $100,000 or $150,000 to now $500,000, well, their Social Security check, if they're 75 years old or 80 years old or whatever they are, and they're getting $1,000 a month Social Security check, that ain't going to, it's not going to cover it.
Not a bit. Yeah.
So you're forcing them to sell and go to a nursing home, and they may not have the money for that.
Right, exactly. So you're putting more pressure on assisted living, independent living, nursing home, putting pressure,
Medicare, Medicaid,
putting pressure on the family, the sons and the daughters of that person that has the capabilities of living on their own. They want to die in their home.
That's what I'm talking about. When I talk about property tax relief, I'm talking about for the indigent, the people who are just barely able to hang on to their house and the elderly, right? Let those people out of this finance trap on their property taxes because they can't swing it. And it's a way for the vultures to come in and get their properties at, low cost because they know these people are under pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You had some other stuff. Let's just focus on Ohio. We got a lot of stuff. We don't even to go national.
Well, let me just hit a few national things.
Let's do.
So at the cabinet meeting, I love this idea of Trump having a televised cabinet meetings. Super interesting. So he goes to each secretary around the table, and they get to talk about, the latest hot item for them. And when they got to Elon Musk and the Secretary of Labor, they announced that they have found around, I can't believe this number, $150 billion over some period of time in fraudulent unemployment compensation applications. And so he wants to cut $1 trillion before he resigns. Well, I mean, that's 15% of it right there, $150 billion. And then Lee Zeldin, the Secretary of the EPA, announced that he's located $22 billion in NGO games where instead of directly funding an activity carried out by the EPA, they offload it to an NGO to do something allegedly for the U.S. taxpayer. And he found $22 billion of waste and fraud there, including $4 billion that the EPA prior administration had put into an offshore bank account so it wouldn't show up on the books so they could spend it out of some kind of Virgin Islands or Bermuda account, which is crazy.
Yeah. Interesting.
And then some other quick things. The Postal Service announced they want to go from 73 to 78 cents on a first-class stamp.
Okay, you know what?
And that kills me.
To quite frankly, their marketing of having the forever stamp was a genius idea. Because if
we should have bought them back in
you would have asked me what the first class postage, what it costs, I could not have told you. Right. I would not even have been 20 cents. I'd have been 20 cents off.
It was 55 cents not long ago.
I was just going to say, I was going to go with 53, 55 or something like that. And when you're telling me 78, I had no idea. That's how.
It's currently 73. They want to go to 78 this summer.
Wow.
And this is like their third nickel increase, 5 cents, in like the last 2 years. Like they keep just, I know they're broke. And I know that Musk and Trump have both said that they'd like to privatize it or, in other words, make it something that, say, UPS or FedEx bid on and they run it. And the employees would then become, I don't know, either remain public or go private or whatever. Right. But they're talking about ways to perhaps make it more efficient.
Yeah.
Couple other things. We talked about the NIL here on this program about the college NIL thing and, that court
name, image, and likeness.
Yeah. And where they're paying students directly, athletes. And, they're doing crazy stuff in like the Big Ten, the Big 12. Some of the incoming quarterbacks, like these are high school students, are getting $1 million. And the guy at Michigan, $12 million, right, to come in as a freshman. So what they've asked is the Big Ten, the SEC, and the Big 12 have all asked, all the commissioners are asking Congress to do some. So instead of 50 laws controlling because there's a national championship, right, with the NC2A, how can you have 50 different ways that NIL is handled? Because what that's going to do, the big schools in the big states, they're going to take care of, say, Ohio State or Michigan or Notre Dame. They're going to take care of those schools. But what about your Kent States, right? And your Denisons and, the other programs where basically they'll never get a really awesome quarterback because those guys are going to have agents shopping around for the big NIL. So what they're asking for is that Congress to step in and not dictate the outcome, but lay down consistent rules that like maybe caps the NIL, so that like the most it can be is $1 million or $500,000 or something, so that everybody is playing by the same rule book, instead of what they do in Nebraska is way different than what they do in Ohio. And then that just makes it a very unfair national championship situation.
Yeah. That's just unfathomable that you've got an 18, 19-year-old pulling in millions of dollars.
It's crazy.
It really, really is, on the potential that they'll have the value for the school.
Right.
I mean,
and the scholarship is almost meaningless to that person now.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to get $12 million to come and play college football at Michigan, what do you really care about your degree now?
Quite frankly, yeah. Or the reverse, you could take a look at it. If you were smart, take the 12, get your degree, and I know you love playing football. I get it. Football's life. But it's that, take the 12, invest it, have a life afterwards. I know
100%.
That isn't going to happen. You love football players love football, basketball the same. You know that. It's that you love the sport. You want to play it until
you don't have to go pro.
You don't have to if you think about it. But
take that money.
That's not in their head. I know it's not. I know, but there are a lot of college football players that are not. The percentage of you going pro are very low. So if you would look at it in that way, and say, okay, let's bank it.
Yeah,
I'll play best I can if I get recruited. Not, but guess what? I got 12 or whatever. A couple of mil.
Yeah,
I'm set.
You're set. You don't have to play in the NFL.
You don't
and get
have
slaughtered.
to. Exactly. or never get recruited because drafted, I should say. Into it because percentages are low anyway. You're going to.
Right.
Honestly. So just a crazy. I can't even imagine. You can't either. I'm assuming. Go back to our 18-year-old selves.
I mean, can you imagine? $12 million.
Exactly.
I mean,
I just can't. I can't fathom it. I just can't. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And last thing I have nationally is more and more states seem to be looking at following Texas, Florida, and Nevada and eliminating their state income tax. So Mississippi and Kentucky have announced that they're on the way to trying to eliminate their state income tax in order to draw companies and individuals to relocate their affairs, their home, their businesses to Mississippi and Kentucky. And we've seen that work in Texas and Florida and Nevada. I mean, the two top states for Californians to move to with their businesses are Nevada and Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, famously Musk.
Right. Yeah, because we
taking Texas, Tesla to Texas.
Yeah, if you go back a couple episodes, we had Glenn Harper, and we talked specifically about that. How does that happen? How does that transition happen? Why do states go toward that? And a piece of that is those states are destinations they make it up in vacations, travel, because they're a destination piece to it. So it'll be
not so much Mississippi.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. It'll be interesting on those non-destination states,
right,
that can get it off of hotel taxes and stuff like that. How they're going to make it work.
Yeah,
that'll be interesting because it could, and it's that just because you're not a destination state, and Kentucky kind of is. There's some there's some things to go, not compared to a Florida.
It's a fairly poor state,
right? But there are you hear bourbon trips going to they're trying to be, but not in the same vein as Florida. I mean, not even close.
Not even
but
close.
It's that, what's the formula then? How are they going to do it that Ohio could look at, because we're not necessarily a vacation destination state, but we're kicking it around. So is it a possibility? Does it make sense?
Well, think of Kentucky. So they are adjacent to Ohio, right? Yeah. A long piece of their up northern border, it joins Ohio along the Ohio River. Yeah. And so just take Procter and Gamble. So Procter and Gamble's in Cincinnati, and they're paying, obviously, and all their workers are paying an income tax. Could a Procter and Gamble do the math and make the calculation. Well, gosh, if we go 1 mile south into northern Kentucky, we're not paying an income tax.
Ask our employees to drive 170 or I-71, hop, skip, and a jump.
I mean, this is how states compete.
Yeah.
And I am certain that there'll be at least some small business people, in Hamilton County and other counties adjoining, like Athens and, Portsmouth and other southern Ohio towns besides Cincinnati, go, well, gee whiz, if I go across the border, I don't pay any income tax.
Exactly. It doesn't hurt me a bit.
I'll go buy a home there.
Right.
It's my commute's 1 mile longer.
I think right, and I think that concept needs to be flushed out. I'm not pro or con. I just think it's an interesting idea. Can it be? What are the downs and what are the ups?
Well, one of the things that's interesting, I think this is a little window right into it. So Kentucky got rid of what they call in Ohio. Ohio had this hideous thing called an inventory tax. Mm-hmm. So if you were, say, Procter, I'll just continue with Procter and Gamble. Sure. So they make Tide. We all know that. They make Tide, laundry detergent. So if Procter and Gamble decided, you know what, rather than, pay some kind of huge tax, rather than plow our money into something else, what we're going to do is put more Tide, because maybe the cost of chemicals we know is going to go up next year. So we're just going to make as much Tide as possible, and we're going to create this huge inventory surplus of Tide, be on the shelf. Well, Ohio used to tax the living snot out of inventory that you just had on the shelf. Whether it was General Electric having aircraft engines on the shelf, or Procter and Gamble having soap, or whatever it was, if you had hard inventory, if you were Goodyear up in Akron making tires and you had truck tires on the shelf, right, and in inventory, they would tax that.
Well, and you can bring it down to even a smaller business. Let's say let's say you're a T-shirt imprinter.
Absolutely.
And you have inventory of T-shirts.
They used to tax that.
T-shirts, which you buy probably about $1 a piece.
So why did
you're inventoried on those T-shirts?
Why did Ohio get rid of the inventory tax? Because Kentucky did. Yeah. Kentucky got rid of its inventory tax, and it became something that Ohio businesses, the Chamber of Commerce had a hard discussion with the Ohio Department of Taxation. Like, we're going to lose people. Like, because you're talking millions of dollars, for say a Goodyear or Procter and Gamble to have inventory, and like they can relocate those warehouses or they can do whatever they want to get around that, and we're going to lose maybe the whole company if you keep this policy. So they got rid of it, and so I think that's a window into how they'll respond if Kentucky continues to phase out its income tax. Mm-hmm. I think Ohio has to respond in some way.
Yeah, or keep an eye on it and see, okay, do we match
the
evolution?
Are people
what?
Leaving?
Yeah, exactly. So, no, that's a good insight to at least a neighbor that's doing it and kind of go, oh, we better, kind of keep tabs on this. And if we're going to, let's evolve it, which I don't see that happening under the current administration. So, quite frankly, but I don't know.
One of Brett's favorite topics is stadium funding by the taxpayers, and we've talked about this a lot. So the Cleveland Browns want to move to a different part of Cuyahoga County. So they're on the lakefront now, right, with a fairly recently built stadium. It's not that old. It was built, in the following years after the other Browns team went to Baltimore, and then a new Browns team was created out of thin air for Cleveland. They built a brand new stadium for them. So Municipal Stadium went down. The fans all took the benches at the last Browns game. At any rate, the taxpayers in Cleveland built them a new stadium. Not good enough because it's not covered for winter games. And they want to move to whatever it is, Northbrook or whatever they call it.
What it is,
where the IX Center is, and in that part of Cleveland. And so this Democrat state representative, I love this legislation. I hope it passes. It is so cool. His name is Bill DeMora. He's a Democrat state rep from here in Columbus. What an awesome idea. Since the House approved the $600 million bond in the budget bill for the Cleveland Browns, his separate legislation says if you don't have a winning season in 3 out of the last 5 years, and it rolls, like, every year it gets reexamined, you don't get the bond money.
Damn, Bill, that's a good idea.
Isn't that an awesome idea?
I love
because
that.
There should be a performance aspect. Like these teams. So I'll give you the Bengals. Wow. Well, take the Browns. The Browns have only had a winning season twice in the last 17 years. Okay, where they won more games than they lost. So his bill is just saying a winning season is more than 50%.
Right.
That's all he's saying. And that's a winning season if it's more than. Yeah. So think of all the, like 2 decades or maybe 3 where the Bengals were at the bottom, like all the time. They were the worst. And yet they got the best stadium deal. Sports Illustrated, ESPN, they all said the Bengals stadium deal was the best stadium deal in all of the NFL. And yet the Brown family, the Browns who own the Bengals, had no performance motivation at all. Right. They got the money.
And then there's no incentive to win.
No,
you got it. Exactly.
Because
right. You're making the money off of everything that you wanted in the stadium.
Yeah, if Taylor Swift.
Licensing fees.
Yeah,
and
she does a concert.
Boxes and,
Yeah, they get the parking.
Right.
They get the concessions.
Well, and ultimately, if I heard the plans correctly for the new Brown Stadium, it's still just a football. I don't think it's going to be used more than just that.
Oh, yeah. They're not. The Guardians aren't going to leave the Jake or whatever they call that place.
So you're dealing with 6 home games.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
and this thing
like
is
that.
dark.
Yeah, maybe a few more.
Maybe something to that effect.
Yeah,
but it's this. I love Bill's idea on this.
I do too.
Because and
I think it's a great idea.
This kind of goes back to, and I think it was. I think Pete Rose did this toward the end of his career when he redid his contracts. That he had a bonus clause put in. How many seasons I don't know, but I love this idea that he knew he was a draw. I think it might have been close to the 3,000 hit mark or something like that.
He knew he was a
that
draw.
When
no question.
If there was,
I went to see him.
Yeah, I think it was. I don't know the specifics, but I kind of remember this. I love the idea that he knew he was a draw, and he'd get a bonus if X amount of people, if he drew X amount of people in Riverfront Stadium at the time.
Yeah,
it's like.
Because when he got close to breaking the record, people went to every game because they didn't know whether or not at that game would he get another hit.
Exactly. And I like that idea that it's a perform well.
Right.
People are going to come and see you, so you get the bonus of butts and seats.
So Brett,
I love that. So it's kind of the same line. Yeah.
Brett will love the second part of this bill. So let me roll that out for my man Brett.
Yeah.
The second part of this bill is that if the team leaves, the taxpayers get paid back on the bonds.
Yes.
So they can't go to Baltimore and just not write a check. If the new Browns were to say, "Oh, screw it, we're going to go," I don't know where. Right. We're going to go to Austin, Texas.
Right. Whoever gives them the next best deal.
That's
exactly.
Right. They would then have to pay the Ohio taxpayers back the full amount of the bond.
I love that. So is he getting support?
I hope he does, because this is an awesome idea.
I love this idea because that's a bit more palatable that we support this now.
Right.
Yeah, in regards to taxpayer dollar.
It does.
I still don't like that idea, but it's but that added to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I get it.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah. You better.
Because it sounds like I'm anti-sports. I'm not. I think it's great, but it has its balance.
These are billionaires we're giving billions to.
Exactly.
So let's talk some numbers. On this Cleveland Stadium, the cost they're projecting is $2.4 billion. They want the taxpayers to pay half of that. And then the other half is coming from the NFL, like this profit sharing and other ways that they'll raise money. But $600 million is in the state budget bill that just passed, and it will cost. So it doesn't cost the taxpayers $600 million. No. It's a 25-year bond, and it will cost a total of $1 billion for the taxpayers to pay that $600 million to the Browns project. And then on top of it, the other half of the 1.2 of the 2.4 billion total, the other half of the public money would have the Haslam family wants Cuyahoga County, which has their current stadium, right, to pay $600 million to them to move to another part of Cuyahoga County. So can you imagine the taxpayers in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, how they feel about this?
Yeah.
Like we just built you a stadium, I don't know, 15 years ago or 20 years, whenever the Baltimore thing happened. And now you're coming back and, you want us to pay for half of your $2.4 billion stadium. And it's a perfectly good stadium. It just doesn't have a roof on it.
And it doesn't have the nuances of the new stadiums, obviously. Of course. I totally understand that. Right. But there's got to be some strings to this money. And plus, without beating a dead horse here, so we're talking $2.4 billion. Will that money and then some come back into the Cleveland area as an ROI?
It's kind of hard to imagine.
To me, it is too.
I mean,
when you're dealing with, okay, I'll give you 10 home games.
All of the economic activity, like the logo hats and jerseys and the seat licenses and the parking, all of that cash goes to the Browns.
Right.
It's not going to go to the taxpayers.
Right. It's an overnight. You spend the money on food, overnight accommodations. Boom, done.
Do you think Bengals fans are going to drive to Cleveland, eat real big in Italian Village the night before, get a hotel room at the Hilton? Oh, I would say a few thousand might do that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
The bulk of the Bengals fans, just like Browns fans,
drive the day of.
They're going to drive day of. The game starts at 1 in the afternoon. Right. It's a 5-hour drive.
Yeah.
So
even Steelers fans, Bill, fantastic idea.
Right.
God bless you.
Yeah.
That's creative.
Right.
That's what we ask of our legislators.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right.
Is that
outside of the box thinking.
Accountability.
That
kind of really does make a lot of sense.
Right.
That you can put your hand up going, I can live with that.
Yeah.
That's
three out of 5 years. So they don't have to have a winning record every year.
Yeah.
Just 3 out of 5 years. And that will light a fire under the coaches and the owners and
could become a wave across the nation.
Yeah. Do not play for last place so you get a first round draft pick.
Bingo.
Right?
Bingo.
Hey guys, you got to have a winning season or else we're going to lose $600 million.
Exactly.
And what's coming out of this, of course, now that $600 million of Ohio taxpayer money over time translates into $1 billion, for over 25 years. So it's just like the mortgage on your house. Yeah, you're going to go borrow, whatever, $500,000 for your house. But when you've got it paid off after 30 years and you see what you paid in principal and interest, it's probably like double that. Yeah. So at any rate, what's going on because of this is other teams, professional teams in Ohio, like the Bengals, have come out and the Bengals have said they want $350 million to rehab Paycor Stadium. Well, naturally, because they're seeing the Browns get the money, and they're saying, hey,
At least it's a rehab versus brand new.
Joe Burrow's mother needs to view this from a skybox, right?
Exactly.
Or whatever they're going to do.
Yeah.
So, it never ends. So that makes Bill's idea of a winning season in 3 out of every 5 years snapshot more compelling to me.
Yeah.
So,
anyway.
Good
deal. That's great.
Good job, Bill.
Yeah, no kidding.
There's a lot of debate, and we knew this was going to happen. Once you gave taxpayers, or I should say parents, the vouchers that they then can go shop with, school choice vouchers that they can spend at a public school, they can spend at a private school, a charter school, a parochial school, whatever kind of school. They get this little, it's not little, I think $8,000 for primary and something like $10,000 for high school, just round numbers. They get that little ticket to spend at a school of their choice, right? And we knew this was going to happen, that many parents would pull out of public schools, yes, and spend that at charter and other kinds of schools. So the other foot has dropped. And even though the state of Ohio's new budget has increased funding for education, 2 times the amount of per pupil spending is going to school choice voucher parents instead of directly per pupil to the public schools, because so many parents have signed up for school choice. Now, are they spending that at public schools that'll allow parents that shop? Like, in other words, if I'm in the Columbus School District and adjacent to me is Upper Arlington, and I think no insult to anybody, but I think people would generally acknowledge, realtors would know this, that homes in Upper Arlington have a premium because the school district is so good there. That's one reason they cost more versus Columbus. So if I'm adjacent and there's a policy at Upper Arlington, and I have no idea if there is, but it's an optional policy. If Upper Arlington says, we will accept students from adjacent districts, well, then people may spend that voucher, that school choice voucher, instead of in Columbus, at Upper Arlington instead of another public school. I don't know which way it cuts right now. I don't know if that's been studied. I would say somebody at the Department of Education probably knows that stat. But the bottom line is more money now, twice as much, is going to voucher parents than is going on a per pupil basis from the state of, now we're not talking property tax money, we're talking about state subsidy directly on a per pupil head count to public schools. That is a game changer. That is, we kind of thought this would happen, and it has happened.
Yeah.
I know. I don't know if it's good or bad.
I don't know.
But it does mean.
Well, it certainly sends a signal. It sends a signal that, you know what, public education, F you.
Okay. Well, Brad.
And we're going to go to charter. I mean, bottom line, come on. Because what if it did the reverse? You'd say can say that against charter. You know what I mean?
Well, there never was school choice before.
Well, that's I mean in regards.
So
to,
the reverse was so like I sent my two children to parochial schools. I got a big fat nada from the state of Ohio. Exactly, I just paid. My wife and I we just paid, and I think it was somewhere around $15,000 a year.
Yeah,
came out of our family budget. Now, to go to DeSales, let's say, in Columbus, we would have gotten a $10,000 or a $12,000 check. And so instead of spending our $15,000, after we pay for the public schools too, right? So it's not like it's not like we got a break on our property taxes or our income taxes. So we paid for our sons to go to public school. We chose not to, and then on top of that, we paid $15,000 for each to go to DeSales.
Right. What was the incentive to? Did you read? Because I missed this too. The incentive to increase that is because just to pull more families to make the choice because it's more sexy, is it the money's needed?
The money's needed
for the school systems that they're going to.
Well, also there is a constitutional obligation to fund public schools. To provide a thorough and efficient, are the words in our Constitution, of education. Now, it doesn't say public schools, but it's always been interpreted because they never funded school choice up until now. Okay. So other than that pilot program in Cleveland years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
But so the legislature and the Ohio Supreme Court handed down a decision finding that the state of Ohio was deficient in funding public schools. You may have remembered that case. Perry County case.
Right.
And so part of that increase is every year jacking up the public school per pupil amount. But as the teachers' unions and other public sector proponents of public school education rightly point out, and Brett just rightly points out, They use the word screw and F you. But he feels passionate, and I respect that. So, but what that means is the net amount going to the public schools has gone down.
Right.
The per pupil amount going to public schools has gone up because there's fewer pupils left in the public school system, right? They're getting a smaller check net.
Yeah.
So we talked last week about it being a civil rights issue, or a couple of weeks ago. And here's the thing. So we know there are areas of excellence in public schools. In Cincinnati, it's Walnut Hills. That's an incredible public school. I think in Columbus, you would say Upper Arlington, certainly, and there's probably I don't know. There's probably several others that are just awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Great places. And if you're not worried about a religious aspect during the entire day, they did just pass this law that allows you, if the private entity pays for the transportation and the child has room in his schedule, that they can go off campus and get that. For a lot of reasons, Brett and I both think that's a little clunky because it disrupts the school day, the flow. But at any rate, it's a whole new world in public education.
It is.
And in education in general in Ohio. We are and there are several lawsuits pending challenging school choice in Ohio.
Well, and it'll all come out in the wash. I think, that sort of thing. But
it will be.
And, we talked a lot about schools. I just caught this article about, I didn't realize, and I wanted to go over some of these as well, too, just highlight, just so we know what's going on, too, that there are state lawmakers, Ohio state lawmakers, have introduced 71 education-related bills since the legislation session began in January.
Of this year?
This year.
Wow, that's impressive.
Wow, yeah, exactly. So, I was looking at them, and it's some of them, it's like, okay. Some of them, it just reminded me of like mosquito bites. It's just like, really?
Yeah.
Really? So
that is aggravating.
It is, because
part of what Kentucky does. I keep going back.
No, you're fine, though. But it's a good example. It's a next door neighbor.
What Kentucky does is they have a legislative season.
So does Indiana.
I like that because
I love that
what
idea.
It says is focus on the stuff that matters.
It's I think Indiana is.
We are a full-time
6 months.
Yeah, Kentucky
maybe
months.
7 months. I love that idea.
And I think Kentucky is every other year.
Really?
Like it's not. They may have changed it, but their constitution, I think, originally was 6 months. Every other year.
Get in there, get stuff done. Quit screwing around with these moronic little.
The state.
Look what I did. Look what I did. Kind of House bill
the
stuff.
state reptile. Stuff like that. Come on, guys.
I know. So SB 34 declares this is what this article says. Proposes that the 10 Commandments, a historic document, so they can be displayed in public schools. Now, the piece to this, though, is, it's not dictating you have to have the 10 Commandments up. It's part of a 10-fold documents that you can have. We want. The bill is saying we want these documents hung up in your room.
And pick so many
10
out of the
Commandments
list.
Can be one of them.
Declaration of Independence.
Mayflower Compact, Declaration of Independence, Northwest Ordinance, the mottos of the United States and Ohio, 10 Commandments, Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, United States Constitution, Articles of Confederation.
Pick a couple, put them up in each room.
Plus, you need to create curriculum or have curriculum around them, apparently.
That teaches American history, right?
Ultimately, it's like, sneak in the 10 Commandments. I get it. There's nothing wrong with 10 Commandments, but
Brad,
I'm also thinking.
You know what it's a poser bill.
Exactly.
It's so this legislator can go thump his chest.
Exactly.
And say, look what I propose.
I know.
But it's in the final analysis.
It's a mosquito bite. It's a damn mosquito bite,
That's right.
SB 109 provides free breakfast and lunch to all students. Not a bad idea. If it can be funded, yes. I don't think it's controversial necessarily. Senate Bill 113 and H Bill 155 bans diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in schools. And that's been brewing for a while.
Yeah, and they kind of already did that for colleges.
Yeah,
So.
Now, I want to give an example, though, what it could back. There obviously, there are lots of ways it can backfire. So, and I've mentioned this on the program before that my son, our son, is a nursing going into nursing at UC, and
which is awesome.
Yeah,
which
and
is
they
awesome.
have a program, a group called Men in Nursing.
Okay.
And because of the chilling effect of what DEI is doing, Men in Nursing is going to go away.
Yeah, it'd be like having, although the women seem to be able to get
Yeah.
away with it,
Yeah.
but like, you know.
So
Because
you would
it's-
think, wait a minute, that's a DEI, but it's like
is-
this has a chilling effect.
It
you
is
know?
gender based.
Yeah,
And I'll bet you $1 million
Yeah.
that they don't block women at the meetings.
No, exactly. No, exactly. They don't.
They don't.
They don't. But the chilling effect of this is that this organization that actually helps men, young men,
That have-
get into nursing, find some scholarships to help, that scholarships are more readily available for females. I'm not downplaying male, female. It's just that
Yep.
I think it's the same thing when you have females going into architecture, that's a male dominated, and they should, if there's some non-governmental
Right.
agencies, companies, organizations that
Let
want
them
to
have a
help.
freaking club. Come
Yeah,
on,
I know,
Jesus.
exactly. Anyway. So, but I'm just saying there are chilling effects. We all have examples, and probably, kind of pay attention to that. SB 127 automatically closes or takes other remedial action against low-performing schools. That has some nuances to it as well, too. But it take a look at it. We could go deep dive into a lot of stuff, but that's why I'm bringing it up. It's like, go research, do it yourself.
Well,
It is.
like the state of Ohio took over the Cleveland school system for a while.
Yeah.
Because they were bankrupt and they were not performing. The kids weren't reading. They couldn't do math.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's legislation of akin to that.
Probably so. Yeah, probably so. Yeah. And, and outside looking in, we mentioned the Columbus schools having problems. A lot of times it's top down. It's the school board that's so damn dysfunctional.
Well,
that the schools pay the price.
I have
so
a
it's
story
like, clean
about
this
that.
up. Yeah.
When we get to the outrage of the week, I have a story.
Some other ones to take a look at: SB 13 and HB 25 establishes a college scholarship program for children in foster care. It's interesting, the stats on foster care kids having the ability to the percentages that don't go to college and stuff. It's like, I don't. Nothing against foster. It smells of DEI.
Well, my
backwards as well too. If you're gonna bitch and moan about DEI, this is it too, right here. I don't know.
Well, my problem, despite the success and choices of your children and my children, all of which are getting or already have college degrees, right? I'm sensitive to this kind of stuff because
me too.
What about foster children that want to be a plumber or a roofer or a drywaller or a mechanic or something?
We've talked about the scholarship
we
thing before.
continually keep jacking people towards college,
right?
And I think it's discrimination against children or young men and women that want to go do a blue collar job.
They have a calling,
Honest
and
to God.
they love to work with their hands, and
or
such.
maybe they need to. Maybe they have.
yeah.
Maybe their mom and dad are disabled, and you got a 16, 18-year-old kid living at home, and he or she says, "Hey, I'm going to go manage a Chick-fil-A or whatever." That's what I want to do. And I don't need a college degree. I'm going to walk in there, show them I worked at McDonald's the last 4 years. And, I was an assistant manager. And this is what I want to do. I want to go into that, or I want to be a mechanic or a plumber or whatever it is. I just think it's fundamentally unfair that we subsidize some careers and not other careers.
Yeah,
subsidize none of them or
all of them in some fashion.
You need to be equal protection to all young people, whatever their choices
because we
are.
need all of those careers supported.
Well,
we need them.
Well, look what
do.
Trump is doing with the tariffs, right? He's trying to reindustrialize America. Well, who the hell's going to work in those factories but blue-collar people?
Right.
Sure, there'll be engineers, there'll be managers with MBAs and all this stuff. But on the factory floor, you're going to need electricians. Mm-hmm. You're going to need
robotics. It's all sorts of stuff that just it's not
that
even
you can get in a technical high school. Go down to the tech school, learn these skills. you got a high school diploma, bam, you can go right to work at Intel or Microsoft or Amazon or whoever's moving to Ohio.
Yeah. Briefly going over some others. And again, I mentioned these just for the sake of you going out and doing some research. HB 3 increases fines for illegally passing school buses and funds bus safety upgrades.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Whatever.
I mean, if we've got that problem, then yes, you got to stop
fine.
doing that. HB 190 requires parent permission for school employees to call the student a different name than what's on their birth certificate.
Which
That's
that flies in the face of previous legislation that outlaws that.
Yeah, that's another little mosquito bite. You got to read through it.
It's people they introduce that so they can tell their constituency
I know.
that hey, I'm trying
I know.
to represent your point of view. But even Bill Maher has said one of the big impediments for the Democrats nationally is stuff like, listen, that's my 10-year-old. And if my 10-year-old has an earache, the school nurse will send a note home saying your kid has an earache, right? But if my kid goes to a counselor and says, I'm not sure if I'm a boy or girl, and I want you to call me Harriet instead of Harry, right? There are state laws like Tim Waltz has in Minnesota that prevent the school from reporting that to the parent so the parent can get involved in the counseling. Yeah. It's ridiculous that, if my kid needs an aspirin, right, I need a parent's permission. But if my kid wants to explore transgender surgery and discuss that, the parent is forbidden to know about it? Come on.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Even Bill Maher said, you can't have laws like that.
Yeah. Again, HB 96, we kind of talked a little bit about this. HB 96, the House State's budget proposal for fiscal 26-27 reduces school funding, caps district cash reserves, and further expands public funding for private schools. So that's the number, whether we mention it or not.
Hey, Brett, in the interest of time, you want to get into some justice stories?
Yeah, I mean we can. Yeah, exactly. Let's do it.
I mean, we hammered Ohio pretty good here.
We did.
On school stuff. But guess what, man? There's some crazy stuff going on in Ohio.
No, do it.
So at my alma mater, St. Xavier High School in Cincinnati, I think she's 38 years old. This lady was a counselor for almost a decade at St. Xavier, which is an all-boys Catholic high school. She is being prosecuted for having a sexual relationship. Well, she's being prosecuted for a sexual battery for having a relationship with a 17-year-old boy. A pit bull attack occurred here in Columbus. So I'm just going to read some horrible Ohio news here. Yeah. A pit bull attack killed a baby at a local fast food restaurant here in Ohio. They ran the baby up to the fire station on South Parsons Avenue. The baby was DOA. So people are now calling for it. I mean, this just is a continual thing. We had a case of two pit bulls killing a neighbor down in, I think it was Pickaway County or wherever, just last month, that trial, and those two people were convicted.
Yes, they were. All right.
So, Ohio, a guy shot his neighbor's pony because he thought the pony was a coyote. So he had obviously bad eyesight.
Damn, that's a big coyote.
Yes.
Wow, where does he come from?
So he wrote an apology letter. Now, this sounds like a nice guy, right? But incompetent, but a nice. There's a lot of people that are incompetent, but nice. and anyway, he wrote a little apology letter to his neighbor saying, "Oh, you noticed your horse is dead. That was me." So he's being prosecuted, though. Like the local sheriff didn't think it was funny. So,
I shouldn't laugh at this the way you.
So Brett mentioned some education laws. Here are some ones that are going into effect. So these are ones that have passed. So we have it's called Ohio's Live Law, and that's a DUI upgrade law. So instead of the minimum fine being $375, it's going to $565, and it increases the aggravated vehicular homicide minimum amount from 15, or excuse me, maximum amount from 15,000 to 25,000. House Bill 206 allows public schools. It's finally giving them the power, and I agree they should have the power to indefinitely expel a student if they have a violent track record at school, if they bring guns, knives, do bomb threats. Hey, they need that tool. Private schools have had that tool to get the bad apples out of the student body. For a long time, public schools were only allowed to do it for so many days. They can do it indefinitely now. If it's truly a kid who interferes and causes malicious physical harm or threats of physical harm to the other kids. Then there's Braden's law, which we previewed. This is a law that takes sextortion. You know, a girl sends her boyfriend a picture of her unclothed, and then he tries to extort either sex or money or something, or, you know, a scammer online does that. You know,
all the AI that's going on.
All the AI.
Exactly.
AI where it's just a fake image. At any rate, it turns that into a third-degree felony, and it can be upgraded to a first or second-degree felony if there is like a recidivism issue, or if it involves a minor or a disabled person who cannot defend themselves. So I like that.
Yeah, that's common sense legislation there.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
who's going to disagree with that?
Exactly.
Right?
Just move the needle forward. Exactly. Yeah.
You want to do some outrage of the week?
Yeah.
And wrap the show.
Yeah. Let's do it.
And then we'll get to our sponsor at the end of the show.
Right.
We have an exciting sponsor here. So my outrage of the week is this middle school principal here in Ohio, here in Columbus specifically, Riverview Middle School. Her name's Natalie James. It's all over the press. I'm not reading anything that's not out there. They called the police because of a bomb threat. The police show up. I think it was Franklin County Sheriff's, in fact, showed up. It may have been CPD, may have been both. But anyway, they show up and there's body cam footage of her having a debate because, in her opinion, the police represented a bigger danger than the bomb threat. And so she would not allow them to just immediately go and interview this child and look into the restrooms or wherever to verify there is no bomb. It turned out there was no bomb. He was mad about being reassigned to a different homeroom. And so he phoned in a bomb threat, right? Like, you know, an immature baby kid would do. You know, he did something stupid. He admitted it, but the principal wouldn't let the police go back and address what they, at that time, didn't know, that it was possibly a real bomb threat. And I think there is some George Floyd fear and some other kinds of things going on where this principal in a predominantly African-American school was afraid of the police somehow, you know, mishandling or doing something to the child. I mean, it's a minor. And so I find that outrageous. And the Attorney General here in Ohio, Dave Yost, also put out a press memo that the police have the right, if you call in a bomb threat, the police have the right to send the bomb team, and they can just go right in. You know, it's kind of like an active shooter situation. You don't know when the bomb's going to go off or where. So, and at any rate, I find that outrageous. She needs to maybe have a talk to the Columbus superintendent of schools and maybe have a talk to the chief of police here in Columbus. They need to calm this principal down. I don't want her fired.
No.
I don't want her fired. But I want her to get educated that the police are not enemies of the school kids. They're not going to go in and abuse this kid. But they need to do their job.
Yeah, they
do.
For
God's sake.
Well, and what if the reverse happened? There was a bomb, and it went off. And it went off.
Then you'd be condemning the police for not immediately going.
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
Wow. Yeah.
Let's get some common sense here.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, at least if she doesn't know protocol, in regards to how to handle the situation, then there needs to be something.
So you can go on social media. Wow. There's actually body cam footage that's on the internet of her arguing with the police that she called. She called them to come, and then she wouldn't let them in the building. Yeah. It's crazy.
Wow.
So my wonderful thing, and then, Brett, you do yours.
Yeah.
I love this 145% tariff on communist China. Now, why do I like that? Because they are violating human rights of Uyghurs, of Christians, of any number of people. They're building artificial military islands. They have a nuclear program and missile proliferation program. They're just a bad actor. And that Kevin Leary guy, the Shark Tank guy, he told Trump, put 1,000% on them because they need us way the hell more than we need them. And I think their economy has come to a grinding halt, and they're going to cave in my opinion. So
interesting.
I like it, but I'm a hawk on China. I think China is, they're going to invade Taiwan at some point. They're an existential threat to the rest of the world, in my opinion.
Outrage. We all enjoy this time of year driving down the highway and we see these blooming white Bradford pear trees.
Good one. I looked up the name. Yeah. It's actually Callery pear.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, and it's invasive, folks. This thing has to go. This has to go. Right. And I was kind of in my mind looking at where these, because we did a trip down Cincinnati, see your son, and you're seeing kind of where these trees are for the most part.
Yeah, they're white blossom trees.
White. And they're mostly on Ohio property in regards to the state of Ohio, along highways, along interchanges, that sort of thing.
They used to sell them at nurseries.
They did. Now
they were legal
last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering, maybe some common sense legislation that maybe we kind of on Ohio state property around Ohio highways and such, maybe we go out and chop them down. Get rid of them. Let's get rid of them.
Did you see where Franklin County has a program in cooperation with cities here in the central Ohio area? They have a bounty on these. So if you document that you cut one down on your property, they will replace it with a
service berry or something like that. One of the list of 10. Yeah,
a tree of your choice.
That is great. That at least help that sort of thing. But I think we see that. I'm not saying
they're choking out good trees.
Exactly. That's exactly. Really pay attention. If you're seeing these trees grow and what tree it's next to, it's going to be gone in a couple of years. So I just think the state of Ohio could actually be proactive and kind of go, most of these damn trees are on state of Ohio property along highways. Right-of-ways. Let's just take them down.
Right.
Cut them down while they're doing road work.
While they're mowing.
And just mulch these bad boys up. Yeah. And there all of a sudden we've got a ton more mulch. And just
So I'm not
time.
Like Ketanji Brown Jackson, I'm not a biologist. But let me just throw this out there. So, Brett, what I heard is the berries that these trees produce are irresistible to birds.
Yeah.
And so when the birds defecate, the seeds are in, and that's why they're invasive. They're choking out other trees.
It's odd that all these bad trees that we get, these bad plants, you know where they come from? Southeast Asia. They always do. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not, but it's like every time we have something that cannot live here, it shouldn't live here. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
it comes from Southeast China.
There's
Southeast Asia. It's like
some kind of Japanese bramble bush in Ohio that's wicked, and they're trying to get those.
But I like the finder's fee.
The bounty.
Dang, that's good. And then my joy for the week: tax season's done.
Oh, for God's sake.
I'm not a tax preparer, but it's the follow-up stuff, and they're doing a great job, but it's like, dang it, I missed that. Dang it, I missed that. But I'm glad it's done. And you know what? Thank you, tax preparers around the country. You did a great job, I'm sure. And I'm sure next week you're gone for a week. Mentally, physically, get out of the office, enjoy it.
And I would just say, two reminders, right? You have until April 15th to file for an extension.
Yes.
So file, if you don't, listen, the worst thing you can do is not file anything.
Right.
At least file a return. And if you got the totals wrong, you can amend your return. That's one way to handle it.
Yeah.
The other one, if you know it's not right, is get an extension, right? Now, they're not going to waive like if you owe them money, they're going to calculate interest during your extension. So you'll owe that. But let's suppose you know you're getting a refund, but you just can't get your act together. File an extension.
Just do something, exactly. And that leads us to our sponsor, Harper CPA Plus. You need anything, I know they're in a bind right now because it's, today, April 11th, the 15th, right around the corner. But you know what? They are a phone call away. They'll help you. I mean, they're great at it. But what they can do is help you with what Norm just talked about, that extension, that piece. Like they'll get you to that point. It's like, okay, you don't want the IRS in your cavity at all on anything.
Oh my God, you don't
They'll
want
help you at least get to that point, and then you start looking at it differently, and then they're going to help you make 2025 tax filing better for you. So make sure you get a hold of them. It's harpercpaplus.com. Okay. So
thanks, Glenn, for sponsoring the program.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you for watching, listening to the podcast. We'll be publishing a little bit earlier next week, starting with Wednesday. So you'll get to hear the podcast and the video even earlier. Have a great weekend.